Well, it's now time to introduce our speaker, and I've got the honor to do so today. This speaker found out yesterday that he was going to be the speaker, volunteered for it of all things. Speaking up here is not always an easy task, so let's keep that in mind and encourage him and give him our love and support. But our speaker today is going to be our senior pastor, Bruce Shelton. Bruce, as a friend, a mentor to all of us here, serves on our pastoral council. He is president of our board. Unrelentlessly, he puts his heart and soul into this fellowship of the inner light, and we're all grateful for that. So Bruce, with a big welcome, my friend, come forward.
Well, good morning, everybody. It's indeed a pleasure to be here this morning, to have this opportunity to talk to you. And as is my custom, I'd ask that you help me with this talk. If we could all just be quiet just for a few moments, let's feel God's presence and affirm that God's going to use me as his minister this morning to say the words that will be of the most help to you. So if we can all just be quiet for a few moments. Thank you. Amen. Okay. Well, today's talk is going to be on Taoism. I chose this topic because it was exactly 10 years ago, July 4th weekend of 2014, I last gave this talk. And I thought I'd pull out one of my old talks, but I forgot it was 10 years ago. So I had to really work to kind of get myself, back into Taoism. But Taoism is one of my favorite religions, and I hope you'll feel the same way when I complete this talk. I'd like to start by saying that we are an interfaith church. In our statement of purpose, we've got this statement: we are an interfaith spiritual community that honors each individual's path and seeks to understand the core teachings of all world religions and spiritual masters that hold that love, light, and joy is the character, nature, and manifestation of God. And so we seek to understand other religions, and that's why we do talks like this. Because if we say we're an interfaith church, we certainly need to know a little bit about other religions. Taoism is one of those religions a lot of people hear a lot of things about, but you don't really know a whole lot about it. So today we're going to kind of go a little bit more at a different level of understanding. Now we have these interfaith altars. You'll notice that behind me we have the Christian cross. We've got the Star of David. You'll notice that up here we've got this symbol up there in our logo indicating we're an interfaith church. Over here we honor 6 other religions. They are Islam, Taoism, Buddhism, Hinduism, Confucianism, and the primal religions. You may say, what's the primal religions? Well, the primal religions, primal means first. So these are the first religions, the ones that when people had just reached a point in their evolution where they no longer had to spend all their time just on survival needs, shelter, hunting that mammoth out there. They reached a point where they started asking themselves, what's it all about? Why am I here? Who am I anyway? And they saw, because they were so close to the earth, they saw God in nature. So it was very much like what the Celtics have done. The Celtic religions. We still see these practices, what I call the earth religions, and the Native American tribes, with the Aborigines in Australia, and in many tribes in Central and South America, as well as Africa. So there's still these primal religions are still. I think you know what the other religions are, have a basic idea about them. All right. So let's look at Taoism. Well, nobody really knows who wrote the teachings in Taoism because it was so far back. But legend has it, it was handed down through oral tradition and then put in the written word, that there was a man named Lao Tzu. And he was born in the year 604 BC. And he when he became an adult, he became an archivist and scholar, working with the government. That was considered a very high job in those days. He worked in a western province of China, and he was a lot more than a scholar, though. He was an enlightened being. He figured out what life was all about and how to live life to its fullest. And so he would teach people, and he had a little following, of people that really could get it. They were ready to hear his teachings. But later in life, we're told he started becoming worried. He says, very few people really understand the simple goodness of these teachings. I'm going to just leave here. I'm going to go out to a place. He headed towards Tibet, and I'm going to spend the rest of my days in solitude, awakening to who I am. So he was leaving, and he's going through this pass called the Hankoa Pass. And it was there that he met this gatekeeper, saw him and recognized him and said, Master, what are you doing? We can't, please don't leave. We won't be able to, we need you. Please stay. So he pleaded with Lao Tzu to stay, but Lao Tzu had made his mind up. So the gatekeeper, realizing this, said, I tell you, would you at least just write down your teachings? Just write them down for us so we have these teachings to study when you're gone. And he said, okay. So he went, we're told, for 3 days in solitude, wrote his teachings up in the form of 81 chapters, 81 teachings. All of them are very short, though. And the name of the book that he created was called the Tao Te Ching, which means the way and its power. Okay, Tao means the way, Te means the power. Tao Te Ching. Now this book is only 5,000 characters, Chinese characters in length. Houston Smith, who's one of my favorite, he is my favorite scholar, teaching us about other religions. He says that this book can be read in 30 minutes or it can be read in a lifetime. Depends on how deep you want to get into it. It's filled with spiritual gold, so you can, the more you read it, the more beautiful it is. For myself, I have a copy of it and a translation by Stephen Mitchell, which is a really great translation. But when I'm doing my daily meditations, I'll just pull the Tao Te Ching down sometimes if I'm inspired to do so, open it up randomly and read a lesson. They're all very profound. I'm going to share one of them with you today in a minute. So it's also interesting to know that Lao Tzu lived in the same century as two other great masters, Confucius and the Buddha. The Buddha was down in India. Confucius and Lao Tzu were in China. And it's interesting to me that these things like this don't happen by accident. So in the 5th century, human race had evolved to the point where they could actually hear teachings like this for the first time. And so now nobody really, there's no written descriptions of who Lao Tzu was, nothing documented, with one notable exception. We're told that Confucius visited Lao Tzu, and Confucius wrote down, he says, I liken him to a dragon, enigmatic, larger than life, and mysterious. Isn't it fun how the Chinese love dragons? I said, he's like a dragon. So Lao Tzu gave us quite a gift, and millions of people have benefited from his teachings. Taoism is all about teaching us how to live with life, how to live with the challenges, the stresses of life, how to get in touch with the Tao, with the flow of life, rather than trying to, when things are not going the way we want, what do? We kind of fight back, we struggle, we worry, get angry, whatever it may be. And he teaches us how that's wasted energy, and how what we want to do is get in touch with the Tao. The Tao means the way. He calls it the way because when he's trying to describe what this state of consciousness is all about, he can't put it in words, you see, because it's beyond words, you see. And we would call the Tao the God. And theistic religions use the word God. In the theistic religions, this power is very personal. Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Hinduism, we know God is a very personal being. And in Taoism and in Buddhism, its focus is really it's what they call transpersonal. It transcends the personal. In other words, and the theistic religions do the same thing. We have to work on it, though. The way I always like to explain it is that the theistic religions, it's like a spectrum, right? The spectrum goes this way to infinity, this way to infinity. The spectrum represents God, okay? What we call God. This side is the personal side of God, okay? The personal aspects, the way God reveals himself to us, okay? This is the impersonal. This is the lawful side. Buddhism and Taoism focus more on this side of the spectrum, right? The other religions, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, and what's the other one? They all, Hinduism, sorry. They focus on the personal side of God. Now, what happens is the personal side, we're praying to God. It's an I-thou relationship. I am here, God's there. Now, of course, ultimately, that's not true. We're all one with God, you see. But we're individualized expressions of God. So the religions over here, which, by the way, about 90% of the people in the world are attracted to religions on this side of the spectrum, Islam, Christianity, and the other two. So this is, we pray to God, we say, God, please let us know you, please let us know you. The more we do this, you see, we start to merge. Then we merge into the oneness with God. So the whole purpose of prayer, you see, is to bring us home. So heaven and earth are the same. Is everybody following me on that? So that's the whole purpose of that's what happens. All the religions basically are teaching the same thing. All right. So there's three ways that we can know the Tao. The Tao, I said a minute ago, means the way. It also can be translated as being, okay, a being, which is another way of saying God. We can know the Tao as the way of ultimate reality. This is the cosmic. This is where we go directly to the source and seek to know God directly. Then we know God on the level of the creation of form. Then we know God in terms of the third way is the way we know God is in terms of the Tao is in the way that we relate to the Tao personally, how the Tao affects us as human beings. So in the first way, the way of ultimate reality, we're told that this being is the creator, sustainer of all that is, the source of all life. And there's one chapter that's my favorite chapter in the Tao Te Ching. It's chapter 25 that really describes the nature of this being. It reads like this. It's very short. There is a being, wonderful, perfect. It existed before heaven and earth. How quiet it is. How spiritual it is. It stands alone and does not change. It moves around and around but remains undisturbed. All life springs from it. It wraps all things with its love as in a garment. And yet it claims no honor, for it does not demand to be called Lord. I do not know its name, and so I call it Tao, the way, and I rejoice in its power. Isn't that a beautiful, beautiful teaching? There's a being wonderful and perfect. Sounds like the same God Jesus talked about to me. All right, now we know the other way we can look at God in terms of the Tao is in terms of the actual creation. If we see a beautiful painting at the Chrysler Museum that was painted by a Dutch master, we'll say 500 years ago, we can't really know that Dutch master, but we can know the master through the painting. So one of the ways we know the Tao is through the creation. So we're told that the Tao is the essence, the rhythm, and the driving power in all nature, the mother of the world, giving life to all things. Now, because the teachings in Taoism is that all the earth, everything that's created, this planet, the planets beyond this planet, are all created by the Tao. There's a great reverence for nature We could say the Taoists were the first environmentalists. You know, they really treasured the earth. And one of the readings, one of the teachings in the Tao Te Ching says, "Those who would take over the earth and shape it to their will, never, I notice, succeed. The earth is like a vessel so sacred that at the mere approach of the profane, it is marred. They reach out their fingers and it is gone." They understood nature, Mother Nature. Now, of all the elements in nature, the one that was impressed the Taoists more than any other was water. They looked at water and saw all sorts of spiritual properties. They pointed out that water is infinitely supple, yet incomparably strong. These are the virtues of a state of consciousness called wu-wei, which I'll be talking about in just a moment. When we talk about water being infinitely supple, yet incomparably strong, the Taoists point out the creation of canyons. There are many canyons around the world. We, of course, immediately, what do you think of? The Grand Canyon, right? The Grand Canyon was this big boulders and rocks and marble, a big mountain, and then over millions, of course, of millions of years, excuse me, water flowed over the Grand Canyon, and through the process of erosion, created this beautiful Grand Canyon, and at the bottom of it, of course, is the Colorado River, all created by what? Water. So with water, it's completely receptive. It's completely non-resistant. We take a rock, we throw it into a pond. What happens? Does the water fight the rock? No, the water just opens up. The rock goes right to the bottom. The Taoists admired the way that water supports objects and carries them effortlessly on its tide. They point out that a beginner swimmer will be frailing in the water, right? Kind of get really in danger of drowning if they get out too deep. But an experienced swimmer learns to swim with the water, learns to swim with the currents, and it knows the water will hold it, will give it buoyancy, will hold it up. And that's the way it is with life. You see, with all of us, where some of us are struggling with life. And the Taoists say that's not necessary. What you want to do, excuse me, I got a little frog in my throat here. Good. And so they said that's not necessary. The secret is to learn to swim with life, to learn to go with the currents of life. Now, that takes us to the third level at which we can know Taoism, and that is in the way of human life. And with this, there's two ways. One is called philosophical Taoism, which is that Taoism teaches us basically how to think, how to get our consciousness right, okay? And the second level is in terms of actual spiritual practices that Taoism teaches. So we have, let's see, philosophical Taoism is a philosophy of life designed to enable us to conserve life's vitality by not expending it in useless, draining ways, the chief of which are friction and conflict. Anybody have any friction and conflict in your life? Anybody that doesn't? We all do, don't we? And the Taoists say the secret is to avoid in life, avoid friction, because that wastes our vital life energy, okay? And when I think of this, I think of the automobile engine. You look at an automobile engine, all these parts are moving up and down. Now, if there's any friction at all, like with the pistons going up and down and the crankshaft, it'll burn up the pistons, right? It'll burn up the mountain, burn up the engine. If there's any friction, the wheels will burn up. So what automobile manufacturers do? They use oil, which keeps the car lubricated. So we have these thousands of moving parts. There's no friction. If there is friction, the car will break. Our lives are just like that. You see, we need to. Taoism teaches us how to let go. You see, how to reduce the friction in our lives, how to deal with life. It involves this attitude of what's called wu-wei, W-U, and the second word is wei, W-E-I. Wu-wei is an actual state of consciousness that enables us to have dominion over our lives. It's characterized by an attitude of total non-resistance, acceptance, non-judgment. That sounds like a pretty New Age teaching to me. You know, I've given many talks on this: non-resistance, acceptance, non-judgment. It's that state. It's the same state of consciousness. You see, it's actually translated to the Wu-Wei is translated with the words creative quietness. It means that the way to experience our maximum potential, the way to experience to be our maximum level of creativity is to quieten our minds. You see, quieten ourselves down. So it's a balance between relaxation, what Houston Smith calls it supreme relaxation over here, supreme activity over here. That's our work. So it's all about creating a state of peace of mind within us, and we quieten our ego. You know, the problem we all have is we all have these thoughts running through our head every day, thousands of thoughts. If you look at these thoughts, as one poet puts it, these thoughts are about ghosts of the past or shadows of the future. These thoughts are worries about mistakes I've made in the past, or they're worries about what can go wrong in the future. Most of the thoughts that cross the windows of our mind are like that. And then what happens? We have a thought about something, some resentment, we'll say, if somebody said something to us 5 years ago. I can't let it go, you know. If I did let it go, I'm going to let that person go. I'm not going to let them go. Isn't that completely irrational? All I'm doing is creating suffering in my own head for myself, right? You wake up it's happened to me. I'll wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, use the restroom and come back, and I start thinking of some negative thought. Maybe it's a regret. Just pops into my head. What do I want to do? My mind wants to grab that thought. Now I can't go back to sleep. I've just ruined my whole night's sleep worrying about something that happened 5 years ago that has long gone, right? But this is the problem we all have. So Taoism is all about helping us to understand the way our minds work, to take our attention to all these, to disengage is the word I like from this endless chain of thoughts. And that's what prayer and meditation is all about. And that's what Taoism is all about. Now, another major characteristic of Taoism is in terms of how it affects us as humans. Taoism teaches humility, teaches us to be humble. What is humility? Humility is all about letting go of the ego. See, all these thoughts create our ego. That all the thoughts are conditioned learning from the past, and it creates they come together and create a personality that we call the ego. The ego is the human mind when it's lost its connection with its spiritual center. That's the definition I use. It's a spiritual definition of the ego. It's not the Freudian, but I'll repeat that. The ego is the human mind when it has lost its connection with its spiritual center. All right, and that's the dilemma that we all find ourselves in. The human mind is so powerful and has the ability to take over. And basically, then we're kind of controlled by all of our conditioned learning from the past, much of which was negative. So, all right, now when I make my connection with my spiritual center, my mind is free then, you see. And that's what life is. That's really what all the religions teach. Jesus called it the spiritual center. He called it the kingdom of God within, right? All the religions teach this. When the Buddha had his experience of enlightenment, what happened? He just awakened to what? His true spiritual self, you see, within. He just called it nirvana as opposed to the kingdom of God. It's talking about the same thing. Well, the state of consciousness of Wu-Wei is the exact same thing. We want to get our state of consciousness, and so it's so peaceful and quiet that we can connect with our spiritual center. Taoism teaches relativity. It teaches everything in life is relative, okay? Everything that happens to us is relative. It's not, there's some people who believe everything is black and white. This is good, this is bad, you know? If you don't believe in the good I have, then that means you're bad, right? Taoism says, no, there's grays in between. And they say even the concepts of good and bad are relative. And then they have the famous story of the farmer whose horse ran away. Many of you have heard this story. It's a beautiful story. farmer has this beautiful wild stallion. It's his pride and joy. It's the envy of all his neighbors. And one day, the stallion leaps over the fence and takes off, and the farmer can't get him. He's lost his prized possession. And a neighbor hears about this, and because word travel fast in that neighborhood, and neighbor hears about it, and comes by, oh, I'm so sorry, man, to hear this. You lost your prized stallion. I'm so sorry. And what does the farmer say? He says, who knows what's good or bad? Who really knows? Well, it kind of proved to be true, because then a few days later, the stallion came back and had a whole herd of wild horses with him. They brought with him. They followed the stallion right into the corral, and neighbor heard about, oh, this is wonderful. You know, you look what you've got. These horses are worth a fortune. And the farmer says, who knows what's good or bad? Well, a few days later, farmer's son is riding one of these wild horses in an effort to tame it. He's thrown, he breaks his leg. Neighbor comes by and says, oh man, this is the worst news. I'm so sorry to hear your son broke his leg on one of those wild horses. Farmer says, what does he think he says? Who knows what's good or bad, right? And that also proved to be true, because a few days later, the emperor's soldiers were marauding through the country and picking up young men at random and conscripting them into the emperor's army. And they didn't want the son, because the son had a broken leg. So who knows what's good or bad, right? And isn't that true with our own lives so often? You know, we go through life, and what we thought was a curse when it happened, later on it turns out to be a blessing in disguise. It's really so true, you know. So everything's relative in life. That's why there's an absolute perfection to life that we don't really see sometimes. But there's an absolute perfection behind it all. Sometimes it's the hardest things, the most painful experiences that actually help us to grow spiritually more than anything else. If everything's going well with myself, why would I? All the spirituality, well, I'll deal with that later, you know. No, but when we're going through painful experiences, God, help me, I need a little help here, you know. That's when we pray the most sincerely, most spontaneously, and that's when our prayers are the most powerful. And so suffering seems to do more good in terms of helping us to grow spiritually than any other force on the planet. Not that we want to go out looking for it. It defines us pretty easy, doesn't it? Okay, well, there's now I'm getting near the end of my talk here, so I've got to, and Jerry just held up the 5-minute sign there. Thank you, Jerry. The other level I mentioned, the first is called philosophical Taoism. Then the second level is called the vitalizing Taoism. That's the part of Taoism that actually teaches spiritual practices, okay? So one of the gifts that Taoism gave to the world was they created an entire pharmacopoeia of medicinal herbs. You know, Eustace Smith kind of humorously says that the Taoists must have eaten everything, because they went out and ate all the plants, and they found out the ones that actually had medicinal properties. And that all evolved into what today we call it Chinese medicine. And it all came from Taoism. And the Taoists found that there were certain body movements that gave us strength. And this evolved into different schools of Qigong, Tai Chi, and Kung Fu. Kung Fu is a martial art, and it was all rooted in the basic principles and ethics of Taoism. The Taoists gave us acupuncture. The Taoists realized that certain points, pressure points on the body that could be, put a pin in it or even just pressure it with your fingers, and it increased the energy flow through the body. Also, they put a great deal of emphasis on meditation. Quieting the mind. What is meditation? I gave a whole talk on this last month, I think. Meditation is quieting the mind, calming the heart, so that we can go within. Tao Te Ching says, to the mind that is still, the whole world surrenders. And I'd also just like to say that the last part of the talk here that, and it's interesting in China, these different religions, Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism, sorry, they all interplay with one another. Over here, if you ask somebody, what's your religion? I'm a Buddhist, I'm a Episcopalian, I'm a Baptist, I'm a Lutheran. And over there, Houston Smith says that every Chinese is Confucian in ethics in public life, and Taoist in private life and hygiene, Buddhist in matters relating to death. Okay? So there's an interplay. They use all three of these different spiritual teachings. Houston Smith says that the Chinese will wear the hat of Confucius, the robe of the Taoist, and the sandals of the Buddhist. Okay? Which is, I think, is pretty cool. And the last thing I wanted to say was these teachings have all been partly responsible for the economic revolution that's occurred in China and Japan and Korea during the past 40 years. Why? Because Taoism teaches us to work together in harmony with one another. You know, instead of having friction, Taoism says we all need to work together. So in Japan, for example, the best ways to look at it is through the Japanese automakers, Honda, Toyota, and Nissan. I remember back in the 60s when I got my first Volkswagen Bug, right? That I was looking at consumer reports in terms of what cars had the highest ratings. Even back in the 60s and 70s, the Japanese cars always were a little bit superior to the American cars. And I keep thinking, well, if this is going to change, surely Americans are going to catch up. Well, it hasn't happened. You know, there's still some American cars that are exceptions that are very good. But the Japanese cars in general have this reputation of high reliability, low maintenance, and so forth. And Houston Smith points out that this is partly because of the ethics taught in these three systems of Confucianism, Taoism, and so forth. And for example, there was this CEO of one of the Japanese automakers. He says, "I'm just as concerned about the worker on the line as I am about my own family." And there was a study done where it was found that the average worker in Japan took only 5.5 days vacation time in a year, whereas they were entitled to 12 days. And it was asked, why they were asked, why do you do this? He says, well, I knew if I took time off, it would put more pressure on my fellow workers, so I didn't want to do that. So all this together, you see, creates the superior automobile. Everybody's working together. And you compare that with the American manufacturers, where it's all about money. You got management wants to make as much money as it can. The labor unions want to make as much money as they can. They're fighting with each other. I wonder why the Japanese cars are so superior. Okay, with that, I'll close. Thank you so much.